Greetings, happy Sunday. This is Reverend Tara with Allen Avenue Unitarian Universalist Church. We had some tech challenges this morning, and unfortunately, we're not able to record our Sunday morning worship service on May 5th at 10 a.m. at Allen Ave, UU in Portland. And so this is a recording of a few different parts of the service for those who tried to join us on Zoom and were not able to hear. We are sorry and working on fixing whatever the issue is. You know, technology, it can be complicated. So here we are, and I invite you into a spirit of worship and reflection and deepening. In our time together here, across distance and across time, our shared time of being in this way of connecting, we are going to ponder the possibility that perhaps laziness does not exist. We will reflect together on the story our culture, with the help of capitalism, ableism, and size bias, among other things, has taught us about hard work, rest, play, and what it takes to be good enough. And we'll revisit what the core of our universalist theology has to say about where our worth really comes from. And so as you settle into this time, I invite you to take a breath. And I will share with you our opening words, a poem called Generational Wealth by Black UU poet and activist Atina O'Donnell. My grandmother was so tired that my mother was born tired. My mama's so tired that I'm tired right now. And I see my children getting tired, so it's time to put this to bed. I will gift time to my children. They will inherit a legacy of resting. Leisure time and vacation days taken, sick time used to nap and renew. I'll steal time and show them how to eat it raw. I'll say yes to my babies on the clock. Show them how to tuck joy and stillness into the pockets of reclaimed life. When I accrue time, I let them see how I use it. When I take time, I give it to them and let them play. I save time in their names for them to practice how to protect it and spend it on rest. It has been said that the best things in life are free. Untrue. The high cost of the best things in life is time. My progeny will know that time seeds restoration, how creativity is nurtured by time to play, how love is deepened by time together, how revolution needs time to imagine, how healing and growing are possible, and what it takes to rebuild broken skin and bone. That wellness is rest, is time, is wealth. So friends, come into this space of reflection, of deepening, of connection, and of rest. Come and be welcome. You are joyfully called to worship. Our reading this morning is from a book called, which I'll talk a little bit more about in the sermon, from a book called Laziness Does Not Exist, by social psychologist Dr. Devin Price. Hear his words. The word lazy is almost always used with a tone of moral judgment and condemnation. When we call someone lazy, we don't simply mean they lack energy. We're implying that there's something terribly wrong or lacking with them, that they deserve all the bad things that come their way as a result. Lazy people don't work hard enough. They made bad decisions when good ones seemed just as feasible. Lazy people don't deserve help, patience, or compassion. It can be comforting in a sick way to dismiss people suffering like this. If all the homeless people I see on the street are in fact in that position because they're lazy, I don't have to give them a cent. If every person who's ever been jailed for drug possession was simply too lazy to get a real job, I don't have to worry about drug policy reform. And if every student who gets bad grades in my classes is simply too lazy to study, then I never have to change my teaching methods or offer any extensions on late assignments. The people we've been taught to judge for not trying hard enough are almost invariably the people fighting valiantly against the greatest number of unseen barriers and challenges. The thing that we call laziness is often actually a powerful self-preservation instinct. When we feel unmotivated, directionless, or lazy, it's because our bodies and minds are screaming for some peace and quiet. The laziness we've been taught to fear does not exist. There is no morally corrupt, slothful force inside us driving us to be unproductive for no reason. It's not evil to have limitations and to need breaks. Feeling tired or unmotivated is not a threat to our self-worth. The feelings we write off as laziness are some of humanity's most important instincts, a core part of how we stay alive and thrive in the long term. When people run out of energy or motivation, there's a good reason for it. Tired, burned out people aren't struggling with some shameful, evil inner laziness. Rather, they're struggling to survive in an overly demanding workaholic culture that berates people for having basic needs. Therein ends the reading. So this past winter, I was in the library looking for a book. I found it in the stacks and made my way toward the stairs, but I stopped by the new releases. A brightly colored book caught my eye. Its title, Laziness Does Not Exist. Suffice it to say, it came home with me. I didn't fully buy it at first, this idea that laziness totally does not exist. Surely that's a bit extreme, I thought. I can think of times in my own life where I have been lazy, or when I felt like someone else was being lazy. But as I read, and my understanding of this argument that laziness does not exist deepened, so much began to click for me. Both about the stories our culture tells about work and productivity, and also about the countercultural message our faith offers about inherent worth and belovedness. Devin Price, a social psychologist and author of Laziness Does Not Exist, describes the laziness lie as a deep-seated cultural held belief system that says hard work is morally superior to relaxation, that people who aren't productive have less innate value than productive people. Hard work is morally superior to relaxation, and people who aren't productive have less innate value. I want you to take a moment and think about whether and how the laziness lie has worked its way into your own belief system. It certainly worked its way into mine. Dr. Price offers 3 different assumptions that make up this lie. The first is that your worth is your productivity. The second, that you cannot trust your own feelings and limits. And the third, that there is always more you could be doing. Do these resonate with you? They certainly resonate with me. In fact, when I was in college, my friend who was on the ski team with me got a kick out of coming up with these funny little taglines for each of our teammates that described something essential to who they were. Mine was Tara Humphries, make an appointment. It's sort of funny and still pretty true. And I'm not entirely proud of my busyness being a core part of how I am in the world. I want to be more of a, yeah, come on by kind of person and less of a make an appointment person. I'm working on it. I have been for a while, but it's hard. It's hard. And one of the reasons I think it's so hard is that many of us, whether we believe in or make these assumptions, that our productivity is our worth, that we can't trust our feelings and limits, and that there's always more to be done. Whether or not we believe or make these assumptions, we live our lives as if they are true. We live our lives as if they are true. It's hard to change your behavior, to change the way you live, if the water you're swimming in is a story that tells you you're not only wrong by rejecting this paradigm, but fundamentally bad. There are people, of course, whose lives are extremely busy by necessity. People who need to work multiple jobs to pay their bills. People who have family members with high caregiving needs. People whose schedules are dictated by those who have power over them. Being busy doesn't make you wrong or bad, but it also doesn't make you better than anyone else. Neeru Paharia, a professor of consumer marketing at Arizona State University, actually studies busyness. In an interview for The Atlantic, she gives her perspective on why in our culture, busyness has become a status symbol. She writes, time has this property of being scarce. When we think about products that are scarce, there are very few of them out there. So people really want them. If you have very little time, then you in and of yourself are somewhat of a scarce resource. And then people come to feel that you're more valuable or have more social status. So the problem isn't busyness ultimately, though that can certainly cause problems like stress and lack of connection and not taking care of our bodies. The problem is that many of us end up so busy because we are fundamentally afraid of being lazy. And it's convenient to blame people for being lazy. In Dr. Price's words, if all the homeless people I see on the street are in fact in that position because they're lazy, I don't have to give them a cent. If every person who's ever been jailed for drug possession was simply too lazy to get a real job or to get sober, I don't have to worry about drug policy reform. And if every student who gets bad grades in my class is simply too lazy to study, then I never have to change my teaching methods. And there are more. If every physically, intellectually, or developmentally disabled person is simply too lazy to work, then the government doesn't need to fund or make accessible disability benefits. If every person in a larger body is simply too lazy to exercise or eat fresh vegetables, then we never have to examine our anti-fat bias or the accessibility of certain spaces like airplanes, bathrooms, public seating. Price writes, the people we've been taught to judge for not trying hard enough are almost invariably the people fighting valiantly against the greatest number of unseen barriers and challenges. Existing as an unhoused person, he names, is a full-time job. Existing as an unhoused person with physical or mental illness is multiple full-time jobs. Recovering from substance use disorder is a full-time job. Fighting depression is a full-time job. This is not laziness. What if, instead of asking how they have failed, we got curious about how we have been failed? Not to shirk our responsibility for being active participants in our own health, healing, and living, but to name the truth that we exist not in isolation, but bound up in relational and institutional webs that impact us, whether we like it or not. When we lump whole categories of people into a box, lazy, whether or not we mean to, we imply that they deserve their suffering and that it should be up to them to change it. We fall prey to the assumptions of the laziness lie and create a dynamic of us versus them that ultimately harms everybody. We dehumanize them and we keep ourselves trapped in the rat race of trying to earn our worth. I heard recently on a podcast author Glennon Doyle comment on the ridiculousness of the phrase earn a living. Apparently, we have to earn the right to just exist. I've heard some of you at church ask each other what you're going to do to keep busy when you retire. Oh my God, folks, how about not? How about when we ask young children what job they want to do to earn their living when they grow up? Have you ever thought about how strange that is? So, what does all of this have to do with our faith, with church, with being a Unitarian Universalist? Well, first, after spending yesterday at Ferry Beach at our all-church retreat with many of you sitting in rocking chairs on the deck, drinking coffee and talking, being what some might call lazy, it was so meaningful to me. I felt more present, more connected to you, and I believe that matters. My colleague, Kathy Bowens, writes, "The decisions that we make about work and rest are deeply personal, even spiritual decisions." I'd add, the decisions we make reflect the values we hold most dear. Our Unitarian Universalist religious movement is one of many that came out of the Protestant Reformation and the theological legacy of John Calvin. To quote Kathy Bowers, Calvin's theology included a doctrine known as double predestination, the notion that the ultimate fate of all souls, whether they would go to heaven or to hell, had been determined by God at the beginning of time. But it began to be perverted with the idea that God would favor the elect, those going to heaven, by giving them worldly success in this lifetime. So the Calvinists worked very hard in order to prove by their successes that they were indeed destined for heavenly glory. Hence, the connection was made deep in our spiritual history between a person's essential worthiness and their productivity. She explains that one of the criticisms leveled against the early Universalists who argued that a loving God would ultimately save all people was that without the need to earn one's way into heaven, there would be no incentive for good deeds or hard work. We now affirm the inherent worth and dignity of every person. Inherent worth means that our ultimate value comes with the simple fact of our being. It is tied to who we are and not what we do. Our theology fundamentally affirms that every person, by nature of their very existence, is worthy, is held in divine love, and that there is nothing that can be done to take that away. No exceptions. The rest is a story, and we get to name that and to decide how we engage with it. As it turns out, we need unstructured time, breaks for our bodies and hearts and brains. We need to play and be silly and waste time and not prove anything to anyone. We need to be unproductive, lest we forget we are not machines. I learned in Dr. Price's book that Lin-Manuel Miranda, the writer and star of the musical Hamilton, famously came up with a concept for the show while reading a history book on vacation with his wife. Now, don't go on vacation so you'll get a grand idea to turn into a project. Don't start meditating so that you can be more efficient at work, but do take care of your human need for rest, for play, for saying no and holding firm to your boundaries. Laziness does not exist. So in embracing our limits and in embracing the real barriers to communal thriving, let us usher in a gentler, more caring, more human tomorrow. May it be so. Amen.